I thought the last thing we'd do today would be each of us would talk about our most memorable first audio experience. So I'll start. I actually have two. Back when I was going to university, back in the late 80s, actually mid 80s, somehow I got into this crazy industry of ours, been reading a lot of magazines, and back then, of course, the top two magazines were Stereo Review and High Fidelity. And both magazines essentially said, if it measured well, it'll sound fine. And for all intents and purposes, there were no differences in sonics between electronics. So I had in my mind, based on Stereo Review's recommendation, that I was going to buy the Bose 901s, and I did. After scraping all of the money I had, I found the store that had the 901s and went to listen to it, and it wasn't all that impressive. But I thought, well, maybe it's just a setup. And then by luck, I found a pair used, and so I bought that eagerly, brought it home, hooked it up, and it sounded terrible. It had no highs, no bass, and of course this is unfortunately the reputation that the 901s, or the Bose in particular, has, saying that says no highs, no lows, it's got to be Bose. Well, I even had the equalizer.
Are you getting in trouble for that?
Yeah, well, so I even bought the equalizer with the 901s, and so I had everything cranked up to max. Still sounded very muddy, not impressive at all, and I was really, really depressed. I spent all this money I had, and to get this really terrible result. So I was going through the Yellow Pages. Some of you might still remember what that is, and under Stereophonic, there were a bunch of stores that were listed, and one store in particular called High End Audio. For some of you local guys in Toronto, you might remember. And so I called him up. He was available. I drove down and walked into the basement of the store, and I saw these really strange looking speakers. They were panels and they were transparent. And I spoke with the proprietor, Arthur, and Arthur said, oh, those are the Martin Logan CLSs. And there were these monoblocks sitting on the ground with what looked like tubes and with a turntable and so on. And none of these names meant anything to me. So he played me this cut, Weavers at Carnegie Hall, Rambling Boy. I sat down and I was transfixed. For the first time, I heard a voice right between the speakers, holographically, just suspended. I could hear all the sounds in the background and live recording. I could hear somebody tapping their foot on the platform as they were singing along very quietly, humming behind the vocalist. I was just blown away. I'd never heard anything like this before. It literally transported me to a time 30, 40 years ago. That was my first experience as far as a memorable recording. And to give you the system, it was a VPI HW19, which I eventually bought, with an Eminent Technology linear tracking air bearing tone arm, which I also bought, and a Grado cartridge. I think it was the MCX. That fed an Audible Illusions 2B modulus tube preamp. Some of you may remember that preamplifier. It was a fantastic preamp for the money. Running into the Quicksilver monoblocks. And I never bought those, and I was driving the Martin Logan CLSs, the Generation 1. My second memory was I then started about a year later working for a local legend, NGLC of American Sound. We had sold a pair of Wilson Whams to a client, and David Wilson was coming into town to install the speakers. Back then, David was going around anytime anybody sold a pair of Whams, he would physically come and do all the setup and so on. So I was helping him do the setup. When he was done, I'll just jump straight into it. The setup was done, and David said, okay, now sit here and see what you think. And he started playing a bunch of different things. And again, it completely transformed me. The room was not a big room. It was actually in the basement, roughly about 6.5, 7 feet tall, not treated in any way. just a pair of speakers with Jeff Roland electronics and a bassist turntable. It was truly magnificent, quite possibly the very best I'd ever heard up until quite recently. Three-dimensionally, holographic, neutral, incredible bass, but no overhang. Use all the typical audiophile words. To this day, I still remember vividly how shocking and how visceral the sound was, and that was my introduction to the big Wilsons. And since then, I've been a Wilson audio fan. Anyway, Jay, why don't you go ahead?
Most memorable audio memory?
Your first one.
My first one?
Yeah.
So it's gonna be headphones.
Okay.
Okay, so I worked in the studio before and stuff like that, so I was pretty familiar with headphones. And I needed a closed back and an open back set of headphones because I was going to make my own home studio. And so I already I bought them. And in the after watching multiple reviews, because I wanted to get the best one, and this is gonna be funny. It's $150 headphone, and also university students. So I got the M50X, Audio-Technica M50X, and that was compared with the Sennheiser HD 598 multiple times. And every review said the M50X was better at that time, and so I went and bought that. Now, for my Christmas present, I got the 598 from someone, and it turns out that the 598 sounded much better than the Audio-Technica M50X. I mean, I put the Sennheiser on, and I had to check if my TV was on, because it was an open back headphone, the soundstage. So that's when I first understood what soundstage meant. And that,
so you heard like an out of head experience.
So I was sitting down. It was a real story. After university, I came back and I was watching Netflix, and I put the headphone on, and I was like, "Oh, why is this not working?" And I took the headphone off, and I realized I was coming from the headphone, not the TV. And that was just mind blowing for me. What doesn't matter if it sounded great, if it had great bass. That didn't matter to me at that point. I was like, how can a headphone sound like what? What's going on? And then of course I played with multiple headphones, and then that became a little bit kind of like I got desensitized, right? And then I came into Audio Excellence and met Philip, and he showed me speakers. And of course I knew what speakers were before.
It was a deliberate attempt to corrupt
them. And that's when everything went downhill, when he showed me speakers. But
in a good way, just to clarify.
Yeah, well. And then so he showed me the Magnepans, and it was like just a whole new world. It's like, okay, so we went from here to there, and then now there was like true soundstage.
And of course, in true Jay Lee fashion, the next day he had a pair of .7s. He actually went out and bought them, like with his own money.
Yeah,
not from the store, because he wasn't working at the store at the time.
Yeah, so I asked him how much it was, and then he told me the price. And I was a university student. I was like, there's no way I could afford a new one. So I went and I started hunting for the pair and got it. And then it's good on Philip that he actually helped me, because I wasn't making any money for him in the first place. But he was helping me, and I got Magnepans, and then he showed me the Wilson Audios, and I was blown away. And I was trying to truthfully get close as possible to the Wilson Audio Sabrinas, because that was like not my budget. So I was trying to get close as possible. So he introduced me to JBLs, and everything went. At one point, no joke, at one point I had 60 pairs of speakers in my basement. Bookshelf, floor standard, 60 pairs.
There are people crazier than me.
And then I would ask my friend to go down into the basement and carry speakers up with me and switch back and forth, depending on my mood, I guess. And then at one point I was like looking at all those speakers and going like, what's the damn point? What's the damn point? I'm not gonna do this anymore. That's 60 pairs of speakers in the basement. It was crazy.
Philip?
So many stories. Where to begin with?
First.
No, that doesn't really qualify, because I'm like 6 years old.
Okay, the first most memorable let's qualify, because otherwise, the
All right,
most
so
memorable
first-
audio. Let's call it
first
audiophile
experience.
Exactly.
This happened at a store that I did eventually work for because I kind of inundate myself into the ecology of a retail environment. So I ended up working at Ring Audio. I worked at American Sound. I worked at Audio Oasis, all because I wouldn't leave the store. And eventually, I'm working here, and that's why I'm
We can't get rid of it.
Yeah,
It's also true.
actually, yeah, it's like if I could have a coffee. But my first experience, and of course, I'm like an opinionated guy. I hate to say it, but I am. So I have very strong opinions about things. I read lots of stuff. And back in the day, you read every magazine you could get your hands on because there wasn't really a lot of material out there. And certainly there wasn't a lot of truth out there. So I educated myself just like you did. I would read magazines, audio, Alvin Gold, you're reading these reviews and you go like, oh, this is what this thing does. And I would tell this to my friends thinking like that is the absolute truth. And so I had all these preconceived ideas. And I walked into a store that a friend of mine introduced me to called Ring Audio, sort of famous in underground Toronto scene back in the day. There's a big whole story about that for another day. In any case, I went in there and a salesman by the name of Michael Rule said to me, hi, how you doing? What are you here for? And I said, well, I would like to hear, and I would explain to him my experiences with the speakers I had and so forth. I had Boston acoustic speakers at the time, and I thought they were great. They were really great, and they were pretty good. But he said, well, that's not the be all end all. I can show you something right now in the same kind of price range that would blow you away, with Jay's words. And I said, what, those little things? And he says, yes, these little things. So he put them in the middle of the room. He sat me down. He turned the lights down a little bit. He played me something. I don't remember what it was. And it was freaking right in the middle of the room. I could hear every little tiny thing, all properly spaced. And, it was so realistic. I just thought, I'd never heard anything like that. And the experience was, of course, LS35As. And I said, you can't get bass out of that speaker. And then suddenly he played something that had bass. Now, it wasn't really deep, low bass, but there was definitely mid-bass energy. There was good, extension to the point where it was real. It was realistic, and it was so pleasant to listen to. I just became one with the music, and that was my first real, true audiophile experience. It changed my life forever. I tell clients this, and it's the truth. Maybe, it could have been something different, but it was LS35As. And to this day, I've owned several pairs. I don't currently own a pair, but I would like to have another pair. And the speaker still exists, and it's being resurrected. So it must mean something similar for everybody else as well. So that is what I would consider to be my first audiophile experience, my first universal audio truth.
Well, there you have it. We're going to wrap this up now. If you like our videos, please subscribe and turn on the notifications so you'll know when we upload a new video.